My name is Miriam Adderson. I am 32 years old. I never imagined my life would turn out this way. One moment I was a wife and a mother wrapped in the warmth of family life, the next I was standing in the middle of a storm that stripped me bare. Michael, my husband, was everything I thought a man should be. Steady. Reliable. A man who laughed with his whole body, whose smile could ease the sharp edges of a bad day. We met at a community fundraiser 10 years ago, both fumbling with boxes of donated clothes, and somehow in that chaos we found a calmness in each other. We built our lives brick by brick, until we had a little house, two bright-eyed twins, Liam and Sophie, and dreams we believed would stretch far into old age. But death has no manners. Barged into my life without knocking. Michael collapsed at work one Thursday morning, and by the time I reached the hospital, the doctor's eyes told me before their lips could form the words. He was gone. Just like that. I remember clawing at the sleeves of the nurse, begging for more time, as though pleading could rewind the hands of fate. My children were too young to grasp it fully. Sophie asked if Daddy was sleeping. Liam clung to me, his small arms around my neck, as though he could hold me together. Grief is heavy, but betrayal weighs even more. At the funeral, Michael's family, Margaret, his mother, and Richard, his younger brother, put on their masks of sorrow. They embraced me in front of others, whispering words of comfort. I leaned into them, believing their support would help me survive the void. But soon the mask cracked. Within days of laying Michael to rest, they showed me a side of cruelty I could never have imagined. We gathered in Margaret's parlor, curtains drawn, her face stiff like stone. Richard unfolded documents, his tone rehearsed. Michael's estate, he said, is smaller than you think. After debts, after obligations, there isn't much left. My heart thudded, but I kept my silence, clinging to hope. Then Margaret slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check, $10. $10. That was the inheritance they claimed Michael left me. My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of the chair, certain I had misread. This can't be right, I stammered. Michael worked so hard. He had savings. He wouldn't have left us with nothing. Richard's eyes were cold, almost smug. That's what's left after everything was settled. Margaret folded her hands, her voice flat, final. It's all in order, Miriam. I'm sorry. But you'll need to figure out your own way now. The words sliced through me, deeper than grief itself. Figure out my own way? With two children who still cried for their father at night? With bills stacking on the counter? I wanted to scream, to shake them, to ask if blood meant nothing to them. But I saw no mercy in their eyes. They turned away as though I were already erased from their lives. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the crumpled check. $5. Not enough to buy a meal for my twins. Not enough to even ride the bus downtown. I thought of Michael's hands, rough from work, of how he tucked away money each month with promises of security for us. Where had it gone? Why did his family hold the keys, and why did they lock every door in my face? I tucked Liam and Sophie into bed, whispering to them that everything would be okay, though my chest burned with lies. In the quiet, I pressed my forehead against the wall and wept until dawn. I felt stripped, not just of money but of dignity, of the belief that family protects you when the world turns cruel. Days turned into weeks, and each day was heavier than the last. The betrayal of Margaret and Richard became a shadow that followed me everywhere. Every time I opened the fridge and saw only milk and half a loaf of bread, I thought of their smug faces. Every time the twins asked when Daddy would come home, I thought of that cold parlor where they erased his legacy with a single check. Till I forced myself to stand, to move, to breathe. I took odd cleaning jobs, babysat for neighbors, anything to keep food on the table. But the bitterness festered, because deep inside I knew Michael would never have abandoned us this way. Something was wrong. Something was hidden. Yet at that time I had no proof, only questions that chewed at my heart. So I kept silent, nursing my grief, clutching my children, and praying that somehow, somewhere, justice would find us. The first weeks after Michael's death felt like stumbling blindfolded through a maze with no exit. I woke each morning to the same crushing reality. My husband was gone, his family had abandoned me, and all I had to my name was $5. The bills arrived in cruel regularity, slipping through the mail slot as though mocking me. Electricity, water, mortgage, all of them wearing due dates like threats. I stacked them neatly in a shoebox, as though organizing the chaos would somehow reduce it. But the numbers grew larger while my income grew smaller. I took to walking the twins to school because gas was too expensive. On cold mornings, I wrapped them in layers of mismatched sweaters. Sophie asked why we no longer drove, and I forced a smile. "It's healthier to walk," I said. Inside, my chest tightened, knowing the truth. I couldn't afford fuel. I cleaned houses for people who never looked me in the eye. Rubbed their floors while they chatted on phones about vacations and dinner parties. The smell of their perfumed rooms clung to my clothes long after I left, a reminder of how far I'd fallen. The night I collapsed into bed, my hands raw, my spirit weary. One evening, Liam handed me a drawing he made in class. Showed our family, Michael smiling, Sophie holding his hand and me standing beside them. But in the corner, he drew himself alone, far from the rest of us. "That's how I feel sometimes," he whispered. My heart broke clean in two. My children weren't just grieving their father, they were absorbing the weight of our poverty, of our loneliness. I tried reaching out to Margaret once more, thinking perhaps a grandmother's love might outweigh bitterness. She answered the door but didn't invite me in. Her eyes were sharp, her words sharper. "Miriam, you need to stop clinging to us. Michael is gone. What's done is done." She closed the door with finality. I stood on her porch, humiliated, cold air biting my face, wishing Michael could see how his own blood had turned against me. There were nights when the silence of the house pressed too heavy, and I whispered into the darkness, "Michael, where are you? Why did you leave me to fight alone?" But the walls gave no answer, only the faint breathing of my children down the hall. Twins grew restless, sensing my despair even when I tried to hide it. Sophie clung to me at night, her small hands tracing my face as though she feared I'd vanish too. Liam grew quiet, his laughter dimming. I worried about them constantly. How could I raise two children on scraps, on odd jobs, when everything Michael built seemed stolen from us? The cruelest part was the humiliation. Neighbors pitted me with lingering stares. Church friends whispered prayers that felt more like judgment. I once overheard a woman murmur, "She must not have managed their finances well if she's this broke." The words pierced deeper than she knew. I wanted to scream that it wasn't my failure, it was betrayal, but I bit my tongue and walked on. Every corner of my life screamed scarcity. I sold Michael's old tools, then his watch, then even the stroller the twins had outgrown. Each item carried memory, and parting with them was like burying him twice. Yet I had no choice. Hunger has a way of silencing sentiment. And still, behind all the struggle, one thought haunted me. Michael wouldn't have left us destitute. He was meticulous, careful with money. He had whispered about investments, about security. So where had it all gone? Why did Margaret and Richard hold the papers so tightly, like guardians of a secret I was never meant to see? One afternoon, after a long day scrubbing floors, I returned home to find Liam and Sophie waiting on the porch, their lunchboxes empty. The fridge was bare. I sank onto the steps, my body trembling with exhaustion. For the first time, I felt the terrifying weight of hopelessness pressing me down, whispering that perhaps I couldn't make it. But then Sophie climbed into my lap and kissed my cheek. "Don't cry, Mommy," she said softly. "Daddy said you're the strongest person he knows." Liam nodded solemnly, placing his small hand over mine. In that moment, something steadied inside me. I had to keep going. For them. For Michael's memory. For the belief that truth, no matter how buried, would surface someday. And so I fought through the humiliation, through the hunger, through the endless nights of doubt. What I didn't know was that change was coming, cloaked in the voice of a stranger who would call me just days later, and shift the course of our lives forever. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang, a sound so ordinary yet so startling in my weary little house. I had just finished packing Liam and Sophie's lunch, 2 peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, the last slices of bread I could spare. My hands still smelled faintly of dish soap when I picked up the receiver. "Mrs. Adderson?" a man's voice asked, calm and deliberate. "Yes," I replied, guarded. "My name is Thomas Bennett. I'm an attorney. I represent matters concerning your late husband, Michael." For a moment I froze, the air caught in my throat. His family's betrayal had taught me to distrust anyone connected to Michael's estate. I nearly hung up, thinking this was another cruel twist, another way to remind me of how little I supposedly had left. But something in the lawyer's tone, measured, professional, almost compassionate, kept me listening. "There are documents that require your attention," he continued. "I'd like to meet with you in person if you're willing." I pressed the phone harder to my ear, trying to steady my trembling voice. "Documents?" I thought. I was told there was nothing left. $10. The bitterness in my tone slipped out before I could stop it. There was a pause on the other end, then Thomas said quietly, "That's not accurate, Mrs. Adderson. I believe there's something you haven't been told." My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the counter for balance, staring at the peeling paint on the wall as if it could anchor me. For days, weeks, I had fought the gnawing sense that Michael wouldn't have left us penniless, that Margaret and Richard had concealed something. And now a stranger's voice was confirming it. But suspicion held me tight. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "Michael's family has lied to me, humiliated me. How do I know you're not part of that?" Thomas's reply was steady. "I understand your hesitation. That's why I want to meet in person so you can see for yourself. Bring someone with you if that makes you comfortable. I'll explain everything when we talk." Twins were coloring at the kitchen table, their crayons rolling against each other. I looked at them, my heart aching with both fear and fragile hope. I couldn't ignore this call, not when it could mean the difference between despair and survival. "All right," I whispered. "When?" "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, he answered. "My office is on Maple Street downtown. Please don't worry, I'll walk you through everything." After I hung up, I sat down heavily, my hands still shaking. For hours, doubt gnawed at me. Was this a trap? Another cruel scheme? I imagined Margaret's cold face, Richard's smug smile, and wondered if they had sent this man to lure me into further humiliation. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me restless. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft breaths of Liam and Sophie through the walls, wondering if I was foolish to hope again. Yet beneath the fear, a spark flickered. What if Thomas was telling the truth? What if Michael had hidden something that his family hadn't wanted me to find? The next morning, I dressed in my cleanest blouse, though it was fraying at the collar. I tied Sophie's hair into 2 neat braids and buttoned Liam's jacket before walking them to school. As I waved goodbye, their small smiles gave me courage. Whatever awaited me at Maple Street, I had to face it, for them. The city felt different that day, alive with a current I hadn't felt in months. The air was crisp, the streets buzzing with people who looked certain of their destinations, unlike me, an uncertain widow clutching her worn handbag as though it could protect her. Thomas's office was tucked inside a modest brick building. The sign on the door read Bennett and Cole, attorneys at law. My palms were damp as I pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and old paper. A secretary greeted me kindly and led me to a small office where Thomas waited. He was a man in his 40s, neatly dressed, with kind eyes that met mine directly. He rose to shake my hand, and I noticed the firmness of his grip, not overbearing but steady, reassuring. "Mrs. Adderson," he said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." I perched on the edge of the chair, my heart pounding. "You said there were documents. I need to know the truth. Please don't waste my time." Thomas nodded, opening a leather folder on his desk. "I understand. And I'll be direct. Your husband, Michael, left more than what his family disclosed. He had assets, a property that was kept out of the papers you were shown. The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. My throat tightened, tears pricking my eyes. A property? Where? Thomas leaned forward slightly. I'll take you there myself. It's not far from here, but it's private, secluded. Michael purchased it in your name before he passed. I believe he intended it as a safeguard for you and your children. I sat frozen, unable to breathe for a moment. The enormity of his words weighed on me. Michael had thought of us, even in ways I hadn't known. He had left something behind, hidden from those who had tried to erase me. But my fear returned, sharp and pressing. Why didn't they tell me? Why keep it secret? Thomas sighed. I can't speak for their motives, but I suspect they wanted control. They had no legal right to conceal it, but they manipulated what you saw. I covered my mouth with my hand, anger and relief flooding me in equal measure. My mind spun with questions, but one truth remained. I wasn't crazy for believing Michael wouldn't abandon us. He hadn't. Will you come with me tomorrow? Thomas asked gently. I'll show you everything. Then you can decide what comes next. I nodded slowly, my hands trembling in my lap. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I would step into the unknown to see what Michael had hidden, to learn whether hope still had a place in my life. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. Not just survival, but possibility. The following morning arrived with a heaviness I couldn't quite shake. I had barely slept, tossing between fear and anticipation. When the sun finally rose, its pale light spilled across the kitchen floor, and I found myself standing there with trembling hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. Liam and Sophie sensed the tension. Are you okay, Mommy? Sophie asked, her small voice filled with concern. I crouched down, brushing her hair from her face, forcing a smile. Yes, sweetheart. Mommy just has something important to do today. After dropping them at school, I made my way to Thomas's office. He was waiting outside, his car parked at the curb. The sight of him standing there, suit crisp, expression calm, steadied me. He opened the passenger door with a gentleman's courtesy. Ready? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be, I whispered, sliding in. We drove in silence at first, the city thinning into stretches of open road. My thoughts raced. What if this was a mistake? What if Michael's family discovered what we were doing? What if this so-called property was nothing but a lie? But the farther we drove, the more the landscape changed, replacing doubt with curiosity. After nearly 40 minutes, Thomas turned onto a narrow gravel path tucked behind tall oak trees. The road twisted upward, the forest closing in around us, until suddenly it opened into a wide clearing. My breath caught in my throat. Before me stood a large, secluded estate. The house was timeless, with whitewashed walls, dark shutters, and a wraparound porch that overlooked acres of rolling hills. The air smelled fresh, untouched, as though the world had forgotten this place. It was beautiful, quiet, safe. Thomas parked and stepped out, his shoes crunching on gravel. I followed slowly, my legs weak beneath me. This, I whispered, unable to find the words. This was Michael's? Thomas nodded. He purchased it under your name, Mrs. Adderson. It's legally yours. He left instructions with me in case anything ever happened to him. I suspect he wanted to keep it separate, away from his family's interference. Tears blurred my vision as I turned in circles, taking in the house, the land, the life I never knew existed. For months I had carried the weight of betrayal, humiliation, hunger, and now here was proof that Michael had not abandoned us, proof that his love had stretched beyond the grave. Thomas handed me a key, its metal cool in my palm. Would you like to see inside? My hand trembled as I unlocked the door. The hinges groaned softly, as though welcoming me into its secret. Inside, the rooms were simple but furnished. Wooden tables, soft rugs, shelves lined with books. Dust lingered in the corners, yet it felt alive, as if waiting for us. I wandered from room to room, each step heavier with emotion. In one corner I found a drawer containing photographs, pictures of me, of the twins, even candid shots of Michael working in the yard. I sank onto the floor, clutching them to my chest. He had thought of us here. He had built this sanctuary with us in mind. Thomas's voice was gentle behind me. There are financial accounts tied to this property as well. Enough to secure you and your children's future. It won't make you wealthy beyond imagination, but it will keep you safe. I pressed my forehead against the photo frame, my tears falling freely. Safe. After months of fear, of wondering if I could feed my children another week, I finally had something solid, something that couldn't be stripped away by cruel hands. Why didn't he tell me? I whispered, my voice breaking. Thomas paused, then said quietly, "Perhaps he wanted it to be a surprise, or perhaps he feared his family would manipulate you into revealing it. Sometimes love hides things not out of secrecy, but out of protection." I sat there for a long time, breathing in the scent of wood and dust, letting the silence wash over me. Slowly, relief bloomed in my chest, pushing aside the bitterness. Margaret and Richard's betrayal still stung, but it no longer defined me. Their lies had been exposed by Michael's quiet foresight. I imagined Liam and Sophie running across the open fields outside, laughter ringing in the air. I pictured evenings on the porch, watching sunsets fade into starlight. This house was more than property, it was a second chance. Thomas stood nearby, giving me space, his presence steady. Finally, I rose to my feet and turned to him. "Thank you," I whispered, "for bringing me here, for showing me the truth." He inclined his head. "It was Michael's wish that you be cared for. I was only following through." We stepped back outside, the wind stirring gently through the trees. I clutched the key in my hand, feeling its weight, knowing it was more than metal. It was the symbol of a new chapter, a bridge between grief and hope. As we drove back into town, I looked out the window at the passing landscape, my mind alive with possibilities. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim of betrayal. I felt like a woman rising from the ashes of loss, holding on to something real, something enduring. I couldn't wait to show my children, to tell them that their father had left them more than memories, that he had given them a future. When I picked up Liam and Sophie from school later that day, the key to the estate was heavy in my pocket, pressing against me like a secret I wasn't yet ready to reveal. Their small hands slipped into mine as we walked home, their chatter about teachers and playground games floating around me like music. I smiled at them, though inside my heart was racing with the thought of what lay ahead. That night, after dinner of reheated pasta, I sat them down at the kitchen table. "I have something to tell you," I began, my voice trembling with both nerves and excitement. Sophie tilted her head, her braids swaying, while Liam watched me with the solemn eyes that always reminded me of Michael. "Daddy left us something," I said softly. "A place. A house where we can live, where we'll be safe." Sophie's mouth opened wide. "A new house? Like in the movies?" "Yes," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "A house with fields to run in and a porch where we can sit together at night. Daddy made sure of it." Liam leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "So Daddy didn't forget us?" Question sliced through me, a reflection of the doubt he had carried silently for months. I reached across the table and gripped his hand tightly. "No, sweetheart. He never forgot us. He loved us so much that he made sure we would always be okay." Relief softened his face, and for the first time in months I saw a flicker of joy in his eyes. Sophie clapped her hands, already imagining adventures in the fields. I gathered them into my arms, holding them close, my tears falling into their hair. Michael's love had reached beyond death, wrapping around us like a shield. The following weekend, we drove with Thomas back to the estate. Twins squealed with delight as the house came into view, running ahead to explore every corner. Sophie spun in circles in the wide living room, while Liam opened cabinets, marveling at their fullness. Their laughter filled the air, breathing life into walls that had waited silently for this moment. I walked through the house slowly, my fingers trailing across wooden banisters, my heart swelling with gratitude. Each room seemed to whisper promises of peace, of healing. The bitterness that Margaret and Richard had left in me began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet strength. Their betrayal no longer defined me. I had something stronger, Michael's truth. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in gold, I sat on the porch with Liam and Sophie curled against me. The air smelled of earth and promise. "This is home now," I told them. "Daddy wanted it this way." They nodded sleepily, their trust in me restored, their small bodies warm against mine. In that moment, I felt the weight of grief ease. Not gone, never gone, but softened by the knowledge that Michael's love had never wavered, that he had left us a legacy not of money or grandeur, but of safety, dignity, and hope. I thought of Margaret and Richard then, their cold faces, their cruel lies. For weeks, their betrayal had poisoned me. But now, sitting in this sanctuary, I felt something unexpected, pity. They had chosen greed, control, deception. And in doing so, they had lost the one thing that mattered, love. The next days became a rhythm of discovery and healing. Liam and Sophie explored the woods, their laughter echoing through the trees. I cleaned, repaired, and dreamed, slowly weaving us into the fabric of this new life. At night, I read to them by the fire, the crackle of flames wrapping us in warmth. One evening, as I tucked them into bed, Liam looked up at me and said, "Mommy, I feel like Daddy's here." My throat tightened, but I smiled through the tears. "He is, sweetheart. Then everything around us, he's here." That was the gift Michael had left, not just walls and land, but the reassurance that love endures, even when breath does not. He had given me more than security. He had given me the courage to rise, to believe in tomorrow again. I still carry the memory of those dark weeks when I was stripped of dignity, when betrayal nearly crushed me. But now, when I look at the rolling hills outside my window, I know they were not the end of my story. They were the beginning of this, our new chapter. Twins and I walk those fields together now, our laughter mixing with the wind, our shadows long against the grass. And every evening, as the sun sets over the porch where I sit with them in my arms, I whisper into the quiet, "We're okay, Michael. We're more than okay. You kept your promise." Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel for more stories.